Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. Those interviews are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to competitive teams, racers, rock crawlers, business owners, employees, media, and private park owners, men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active and off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world we live and love and call off-road.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
If you still love the idea of a printed magazine, something to save and read at any time, 4Low Magazine is a magazine for you. 4Low cannot be found in a storefront or on a bookshelf, but you can have it delivered to your home or place of business. Visit 4lowmagazine.com to order your subscription today. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Mike Stump. Mike is an old-time friend of mine. I think we met somewhere around, I probably saw him the first time in 1999. We'll get into that down in Johnson Valley. But I believe I met him right after I moved out of Utah and back to California, probably up on the Rubicon or at a party somewhere. Anyway, Mike was one of 42 drivers in our first event at Lake Amador for the Cal Rocks Put Up or Shut Up. So he's definitely an OG in my mind with us. Hey, Mike, let's talk about your life, and good to have you on here.
Well, Rich, I appreciate you having me on here. It's good to talk to you again. We visited. What was it? Been almost about 8 months ago or a year ago when I met you at your house.
Yeah, it was.
Like that.
I think it was about 8 months ago. Yep.
Right. Yeah, it was the first time I'd seen you in quite a long time, so it was great to see you again.
Yeah, and let's rock and roll on this podcast thing, and let's find out more about you. So, where were you born and raised?
Well, that may be a little bit of a long story, like I said, but I was actually
we have all
born.
the time we need today.
I was actually born here in Utah. I was born in Salt Lake City in 1969. My parents were, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but happened to be on a road trip while my mother was 9.5 months pregnant. God knows why they were doing that, but I happened to be passing through Salt Lake City when she went into labor, and well, about 4 or 5 days later, released out of the hospital, and they finished their road trip. So they were living in, I want to say at the time, they were living in Las Vegas. So after they finished their road trip, we went back to Las Vegas, spent probably the first, just from my recollection, from what they tell me, about the first maybe 3 to 4 years of my life, maybe 5 years in Vegas and outside of Vegas area. And then my parents decided to move to godforsaken California.
Well, come on now. When they moved there, it was a damn nice state.
And absolutely, yeah, we won't get into the politicals, but yeah, so when they moved there, California was a great state, and we moved up to the Sacramento area, bounced around quite a few different little houses there. It was my parents' situation was quite volatile, so we did move around quite a bit. They had a lot of their own issues, so it was in and the house, out of the house. I ended up actually living back with my grandparents in Winnemucca, Nevada for about 4 years or so. And then from there, I moved back. I was able to move back with my parents back into the Sacramento area. That was about 12, 13 years old. We actually moved into Placerville, El Dorado County right around that time. And
God's
never left
country.
El Dorado County. Yep, exactly. God's country. Spent the next 30 plus years in El Dorado County, growing up, going to high school there. What days I did actually attend school, probably doing more wheeling and drinking than I did going to school. So, as did a lot of us back then. But yeah, grew up and did the rest of my growing up in El Dorado County. From there on, ended up got married to my first wife at 21, 22, I think it was, right in there. Had our first son before we got married, so he was actually he was the ring bearer for our wedding.
Nice.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. So I was married to her for almost 10 years. Things didn't work out, as they do with a lot of them. We actually had a second kid during that time. So I've got two boys, my son Devin and my son Chad, who are 30 and 26 now, I believe. From there, during that time, I worked quite a few different jobs, but mostly in the off-road industry. I worked for Central 4-Wheel Drive for quite a while. Worked for S&H 4-Wheel Drive down in Sacramento. There was the one in Auburn, which I can't think of the name right now, but I worked for an off-road shop there for quite a while. Probably the longest stint I had with an off-road shop was with 4-Wheel Parts Wholesalers in Sacramento. Was there for about 2.5 years. Went in there as salesman. Within 6 months, I was the assistant manager, and 2 months later was the general manager of the store.
Wow.
Stayed there for about 2.5 years and was actually very successful there. Made that store. It was actually the top, gross profit-wise, was the top producing store out of all their stores by about 4% over any of their other stores. But I had the Rubicon and all the Jeepers to back me there, so we made sure we carried lots of inventory for a Jeep product, and it worked out really, really well.
Okay, let's spool back a little bit and dive into some of these things. Now, you said you were living in Winnemucca for 4 years with your grandparents.
Correct.
And that was probably, well, by the time you said 7 or 8 to 12 or so. What was
approximately? Yeah.
What was that Winnemucca like? I know now when you go through there, it's just a wonderful place.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up there?
Winnemucca was back then about half the size it is now. It was a really nice, and I imagine still is. I don't spend a lot of time there, but it was a very nice town to grow up. Kids were great. Pretty much you could do, as a kid, you could feel safe. There was very little crime. It was a very nice place to live. Not the greatest time living with my grandparents, but other than that, I did have my mom's parents that didn't live too far. They're only a couple of blocks away from where my dad's grandparents, who I lived with, or my dad's parents, who I lived with. My mom's parents were only a couple blocks away, so I spent a lot of time over there. They were great to hang out with, a lot of fun. Gave me lots of candy. They also they were going to do hunting and things like that. So they used to take me out and go hunting. Taught me how to shoot a gun. Taught me how to hunt quail, how to just do the general stuff that you love to do when you're, a preteen, basically.
Right.
So those were definitely, that part of living in Winnemucca was definitely one of some of my fondest memories. The town itself, was a very simple, very quiet town. That part of it really probably hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot. It's still a simple town, still fairly quiet. It's gotten bigger, but it still has that hometown feel, which is nice.
So, is that where you got introduced to off-road? Did your grandfather have a Jeep or something like that when you went out hunting?
Yeah, actually, my grandpa Glaspie had an old CJ5. About a base of my recollection, I want to say it was probably about a late 60s, 68, 69, because it was definitely a short nose. It wasn't a longer unit. It was one of the longer wheelbase units that had a V6 in it, if that I remember right. But yeah, that was his hunting rig. So yeah, he used to take me out up in the hills, and we never did any, of course, Rubicon style rock crawling or anything like that. But he took it a few places that probably, from what I can remember, may have made me pucker a little bit.
Right.
But That was definitely his hunting rig, and with that his truck. So if we took more than just the two of us, then we would go in one of his old trucks, and there'd be 5 or 6 of us. All my aunts and uncles would go. So I did have a quite extended family on my mom's side. Two uncles and 1 aunt. So I had the 3 of them plus my grandma and grandpa. So it was usually a fairly good sized group when we would go out up there. So that was definitely some of the highlights. I loved spending a lot of time with them.
Is there a river through or in or about Winnemucca?
Yes, that'd be the Humboldt River.
Okay.
Humboldt River is kind of interesting. It winds back and forth like a snake and through the main part of Winnemucca, I don't think it goes any more than, say, 50 to 75, maybe 100 yards before it makes a U-turn back on itself. It just loop. You've probably seen it then. You obviously are familiar with it. It's just there loops back and forth and back and forth, and it's a crazy little river.
Right. It's actually there's a lot of history on the Humboldt from when the area was first being settled by the Americans and the white settlers, you might say.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of a history buff on that kind of stuff, so yeah.
Okay. I'll have to look into that. That's not something I've ever really looked up as the history on the Humboldt, but I will. Since I spent a lot of time there growing up, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it was one of those areas where when they were coming across Nevada, the main trail that people would take to the West Coast was, of course, the Oregon Trail, and then the California Trail came across Nevada, and it was one of those places where they followed, or they tried to follow the water, or go from water to water source when they made those long treks, settlement treks. But and that's how a lot of these towns got established, is somebody broke down and decided they weren't going any farther.
Yeah. Yeah, this looks like a good spot to hang out. I think I'll raise my family.
Exactly. I have a friend up in Rangeley, Colorado, and that's exactly what happened with his ancestors. They were trying to make their way to Oregon or someplace, and they lost the wagon, broke down for the umpteenth time, and right on the White River. So he just settled the whole area. He just said, "Okay, I'm staying. We're not going any farther." Of course, that was probably in the summer when it was nice, and not the winter when it's so damn cold up there.
Yeah, December rolled around and they started thinking to themselves, "What in the hell did they do?"
Man, I should have fixed that wagon.
Exactly.
So then you come back to California. You move into Sacramento area, you said, and then up to El Dorado County. Was that Cameron Park, Shingle Springs?
Well, the first place we actually lived was out in Georgetown area.
Oh, okay.
El Dorado County. We went out to Georgetown area. I don't know if you're familiar. Well, I know you're familiar with the area. If you're familiar with Slager Mine Road.
Yep.
We were at the very, very end of Slager Mine Road. So this was a piece of property that back when they were talking about building the Auburn Dam, this is when they were really talking pretty heavily about it. If they would have went through with it, we would have had about a half a mile of beachfront property. Unfortunately, and so my dad always felt, well, we're going to stay here. We're in the middle of BFE, take a left, a right, and then go another 50 miles. And he's, nope, we're going to stay here because we're going to have beachfront property. Well, as we know, that never came to fruition. So we ended up with a piece of property that really wasn't worth much. So
that's how we ended up in Placerville. My dad was chasing the job. He was going to work on that dam project. And we bought the house in Placerville. We were looking at Jackson and Grass Valley and other places, and he goes, "You know what? This is the biggest, closest town to the side of the lake we'd want to be on. So let's buy the house here." And then, yeah, of course, it never went through. Environmentalists,
Yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't go through because that would have been pretty nice.
Yeah.
But being out there that was. As you're familiar with the rattlesnake fun in El Dorado County and a lot of places in El Dorado County, it was pretty drastic out there. we had our house, and we had there was a single wide mobile that a friend of my parents were renting from us, living out there, single mom with a newborn. And multiple times we were getting rattlesnakes. We had a older Doberman at the time. That Doberman got hit probably 6 times in a matter of 6 months by rattlers. He wasn't smart enough to leave him the hell alone.
Wow.
Finally we got him to stay away from them, but unfortunately it was a little too late, and it kind of took its toll. But the scariest thing really was, for that renter, for that friend of my parents. She came home one time and had her baby with her, and was just about to put her baby in the crib, started to set her in there, and heard some noise, pulled the cover back, and there was a batch of baby rattlers in the crib.
Well, at least the mother rattlesnake knew where to put them, huh?
Exactly. They knew where there was going to be food and everything. But
That's crazy.
yeah, so she right at that point, she pretty much brought her kid in the house for us to watch, packed her stuff, and said, yeah, I'm done. And I want to say it was probably not more than about 3 months later, we moved out of there too, and that's when we moved down to Placerville.
Okay. And where in Placerville?
Oh, God, you're really making me dig the memory banks up here. I'll be honest with you. We probably lived in 4 or 5 different places in Placerville.
Okay.
So I couldn't even really recall exactly where I know we lived. Oh, well, I would say probably the one I do remember, we were up off of, oh God, what's the name of the road? Where the kids' baseball park is.
Yeah, that's the Lions Park,
yeah.
but I don't
Yeah,
remember
not
the name.
Park where we football, but yeah, so we lived just beyond that, up on that hill, at a house back there. So they bought a place up there for a while.
Oh, that's a real nice area. I remember looking at a house up there one time as well, but I think it was when my parents decided to move to Placerville back in the 2000s. But anyway, yeah, that's a really nice wooded area. It's got a lot of big trees up on that hill.
Exactly. So there's that house is where a whole lot of stories come from. So we moved up there. I guess I was probably 14, maybe, when we moved into there. That's where I got my first wheeler. That's where I really, really got into four-wheeling. My parents had bought an FJ40, outfitted it pretty well. This was back in the days before spring overs didn't even exist. Nobody really knew anything about spring overs or anything like that. So they built it. They had 33s on it, stock 6-cylinder, stock 4-speed that was in it. And we'd joined, you probably remember Toys on the Rocks.
Oh, yeah, Warden's
Club. Yep, Danny Warden, all those guys. So we had joined Toys on the Rocks. We didn't really know much of them, but joined that club, went on a lot of wheeling trips, and eventually I was about 6 months later, we found a friend of ours had a old FJ40 sitting in a barn that was starting. It was a 76. It was just sitting in a barn. They had no idea what they were going to do with, so they gave it to us at a smoking deal. I think we only paid maybe $1,000 for the thing, which is just insanely cheap even back then.
Right.
Only had maybe 110,000 miles on it, and that was my first four-wheel drive. It was a 76 FJ40 mustard yellow.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an ugly rig, but I made the best of it. Got that thing up and running, picked up some 31s on it, some decent 31s, decent set of wheels, and that was what I drove back and forth to school between that and my 1959 Harley Panhead that I had also at the time.
So very nice. 59 Pan?
Yeah.
Wow.
59 Panhead, yeah. My dad was into Harleys, had been into Harleys for many, many, many years. There's actually a lot of story behind that too. But he gave it to me as a basket case when I was 15. Yeah, when I was 15, gave it to me as a basket case, which, for people that know, a basket case is basically just a pile of parts in baskets.
Yep.
Gave it to me as that and said, if you can make it run, it's yours. It took me about 6 months, but I got it running and used to actually ride that back and forth before I got my full driver's license to drive the FJ40 back and forth. That was my transportation back and forth to El Dorado High School. To this day, I think I'm still the only what would have been sophomore, junior to ever ride a Harley to high school.
Especially in El Dorado.
Exactly. Now that being said, I did gain the nickname Push Start because I could never get that thing timed exactly right, and 4 times out of 10, you go to kickstart it and they'd try to throw me over the damn handlebars.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So, yeah, as a matter of fact, if you obviously remember Bill Strauss,
Yes.
Bill Strauss, many times, because we went to high school together, I think he was a grade or two ahead of me. Used to, many times he helped me push start that thing.
But you didn't have to walk.
I didn't have to walk, and I had the cool factor of riding an old Harley to school.
Yeah, because you could have told your kids that you had to walk to and from school in the snow, uphill both ways.
Yeah, exactly. I told him no. I just rode to and from school up in the snow both ways.
On a Harley in the snow. Yep.
Exactly.
So you went all the way through high school at El Dorado?
No, well, I see. Back when we were in Georgetown, it was my freshman year in Georgetown that I did I went to Georgetown Middle School a little bit, and then Golden Sierra High School there for my freshman year, and then we moved. That's when we moved to Placerville. So it was sophomore, junior, and I actually ended up dropping out about halfway through my senior year. Due to some issues with my parents and some very poor decisions by my father at the time. So I ended up having to be the breadwinner in the house. And so I dropped out, like I said, about halfway through the senior year, had to get a full-time job and make a lot of the money that way to bring in the house so we could actually live and put food on the table. Because my mom had a job, but didn't pay very well. And without my dad around, she wasn't able to obviously make ends meet. So unfortunately, I had to do a lot of growing up real quick.
Right, I get it. What kind of job did you get at that point?
Honestly, at that time, it was fast food. I think my very first job was when the old A&W was in town in Placerville.
Okay.
Worked there got in there, worked there as a cook. Working the fryer back there. Worked there for a few months. Let's see. I think it was between there and McDonald's in its original form before they rebuilt it, were the two places I probably worked the most there. Then right about, I would say 16 and a half, 17, right in there. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine at the time, his dad owned a construction company in residential construction doing finish trim and light duty framing, things like that. So I went to work for him, cash under the table, and worked for him for probably about a year in doing residential construction, just bouncing around from different jobs. And that's actually, I don't know if you noticed the last time we talked in person, but I'm missing the tip of my index finger on my left hand. That was during that time, running a chop saw and with an old broken guard. I mean, this guy didn't have the best of equipment, so broken saw guard and end up accidentally cutting the tip of my finger off.
Wow. I've never noticed that. How much of that tip is missing? Like the whole nail part, or
right to the first knuckle.
Right. Oh wow. Okay.
Yep, all the way to the first knuckle. It was quite interesting. Didn't even know it happened. I had actually let off the trigger on the saw, went to grab the piece of baseboard trim that I had, and went to grab it with my left hand, and my finger just twitched for whatever reason. It bounced off the blade, and all I did is I didn't feel that part of it. I heard a snap, and I looked down at the table of the saw, thinking, "Oh, well, God, how'd the board break?" The saw was up. Board was perfectly fine, and there was one little drop of blood on the on the saw table, and I went, "Huh, that ain't right." Lifted my left hand and looked and went, "Boss, we have a problem." Yeah, it threw the tip across the room, and the saw was only going about half speed, so it wasn't a clean cut. The boss went and collected it up. We went to the hospital, and unfortunately, they weren't able to put it back on because it was more of a ripped off than a nice clean cut.
But it's amazing that you didn't feel it happen at first. So it happened pretty damn quick.
It did. It was just instantaneously. Yeah. And like I said, it didn't even, and the body reacted so fast it didn't even bleed. It was like one little drop, and that was it.
Wow. I was in high school, and I was trimming photographs for like a final presentation, and we had this huge paper cutter trimmer, with the
Uh-huh.
big handle that comes down, and it had no hand guard on it as well. The little piece of metal they put just before the blade, little loop.
Oh yeah.
And I cut like a corner off of my finger, part of the nail, the flesh, and you could just see the edge of the bone. I didn't hit the bone.
Wow.
And I put my thumb over the end of the index finger. It was on my left hand. And I walked up to the instructor, Telio Bertini, and I go, "Hey, Mr. Bertini, I cut my finger." And he goes, "Let me see it." And I said, "Well, it's bleeding." And he goes, "Let me see it." So I took my thumb off the finger and pointed it at him and shot blood on him. And he goes, all right, you need to go up to the nurse's office. Why'd you stop to talk to me? Like,
because I needed permission.
yeah, exactly. Oh man, the things that happen. See, this is why it's cool doing these interviews, because like you mentioning, getting your finger cut off, or part of it, brought back that memory.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how life is full of coincidences, but so many people have the same kind of coincidences.
Exactly. It's you don't even think about things until someone brings something up. Like, oh yeah, that's right, I did that.
Yep. Especially when you get my age and you start losing your memory.
What was your name again?
So then, you were working construction, got your finger chopped. Were you still driving the FJ40 at that point?
At that point, it was like I said, this was a while later. So yeah, the motor had finally went. I don't recall the timeline, to be perfectly honest with you, exactly when it went, but I think it was probably when I was 17, 18, about the same time that my father had left the picture for a while. That the FJ was broke down at that time. So I think I picked up a God, what did I have at the time? Oh, my grandmother had an old Datsun B210 wagon that they had got a new car and ended up giving me that as transportation, so I'd have something to drive. And I mean, this was the full-on grandma car. It was like an early 80s B210 wagons, all stock, white. I mean, tweed interior or something like that. It was just ugly as sin.
There were some good little cars, though.
Yeah.
I had a B210.
Yeah, no, it was a very reliable little car, just ugly as sin, and just not something I really wanted. Luckily, I'd already dropped out of high school at that point, so I didn't have to get embarrassed by driving that to high school.
You just park it down the street.
Yeah, I'd park it down the street and walk. Like when your parents took you to school, you'd ask them to drop you off a couple blocks before.
Yeah. So then, with the B210 and working, what was the next step?
Well, it's worked through. Obviously, I didn't have the construction job anymore because he decided that I was a liability for him to continue working for him. So after that had healed up, someone I had met while we were working, and I honestly don't recall his name, but end up working for him as an apprentice in construction. So probably till about 19 or 20, I worked for him, and we did spec work. We would just do piecework, mostly siding, a little bit of framing, plumbing line, that kind of thing. So for about 2.5 years, we did that. As a matter of fact, most of those houses in Gold River, right down there in Sacramento. Are you familiar with all those houses kind of would be the north side of the freeway, the Gold River area?
Right.
Between me and him, we probably sided 80 to 90% of those houses in about a 2.5 year period.
Okay. So
that's where I learned a lot of my construction experience. Pretty much just doing just about everything other than maybe electrical and sheetrock, which I can't stand doing sheetrock, but that's where I learned a lot of residential construction experience, which has really helped me out with home improvements and stuff of houses we've owned over the years. So
I think anybody that likes sheetrock work has got something wrong with them.
They're demented.
Yes.
I'm gonna tell you that, right? They're demented.
Yeah.
And then basically from there, from that point is where when I kind of got done with that stint with him. God, I want to say his name was Dave. when I got done with that stint with him is where I started getting into the off-road industry, and worked for, like I said, a couple of small shops. I'm just trying to remember the exact timeline. I want to say I got connected up with S&H four-wheel drive first. Was it S&H? Yeah, with Nick at S&H four-wheel drive first. Then when I was Foothill four-wheel drive up in Auburn that I worked for, but they weren't on the same. So it was S&H four-wheel drive first. Then I went to work for not four-wheel parts, but Central four-wheel drive. You remember Central four-wheel drive? It's been years since they closed.
Yes.
Worked for them for a while, and then it was Nick, and I think her name was Nancy. This is funny. It's the same owners' names up at Foothill. Recruited me up to to Foothill four-wheel drive. I ended up working with, you probably know the name, Tony Kasabasic.
Oh yeah, Tony K. Or
Yeah,
as
Tony
Roggy calls him, case of balls itch.
Yeah, case of balls itch, case of ass itch. That's it. But yeah, no, I ended up working with him up at Foothill four-wheel drive there in Auburn for a while. That's where I actually learned a lot. Learned how to do axle narrowing, cutting, say Dana 44s, 60s, 49 inches. So I learned how to design and cut down and engineer those for the time I was there, and do a lot of custom fab building. Did a couple of frame stretches, custom body lifts, frame off jobs, stuff like that. So I learned a whole lot of my fabrication skills and knowledge there.
And that was like around the mid 90s then?
I would say yes. That was probably around, I would have to say it would have been around a 95, 94, 95, 96, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And the only reason I can assign that is because I remember one specific person. We had a guy in there, I don't remember his name, but brought in a brand new 94 TJ. Literally, he drove it from the dealer to our shop. And when it left, it had 60s front and rear, Atlas T case, custom body lift, and 40s on it.
Wow!
Before the thing ever had 50 miles on it.
The guys do that a lot now, but back then
Yes.
that was unheard of. It was always a process.
Yeah, you got a 25 at that time, probably a $25,000 Jeep, and then he came in and dropped another 20 grand with us. Now that same thing would have been a $50,000-$60,000 Jeep and about an 80 grand freaking build, but nowadays.
Right.
But yeah, it was the same. It was the same thing. But yeah, you don't see that. You just did not see that back then. That was real rare. So we were real happy to get the job.
Yeah, and
obviously.
back then that was mostly custom work. It isn't like nowadays where you can go onto four-wheel parts or any of the big catalog companies and just pick out everything in one, and give them a credit card number, and you've got everything you need, and basically can do it in your own shop, or have somebody do the installation for you. But it's all, everything's ready now. Back then it was all custom.
Well, yeah, and the things that were custom back then, I mean, you can buy off the shelf. I mean, I don't even know if Dynatrack even existed back then. I mean, Curry obviously did at the time, but they were still pretty small. But I don't even think Dynatrack even existed at the time. If they did, they weren't building a lot of the custom stuff they do now. I mean, now you can practically order a brand new JT with Dynatrack 60s already under it from the dealer.
Yeah.
Where you couldn't. That just didn't exist back then. I mean, we built everything from scratch, and that's one of those things where you get a lot of people now that go out and they have a ton of money but don't have the knowledge to do any of that, which I guess is great for them, but they just don't know anything about their vehicle when they drop $80,000 to $100,000 into it, because they just don't know what they have. We had the advantage of knowing every inch of that thing because we built every inch of it.
Right, and that same philosophy is true with the driver's ability to drive their vehicle. They're not starting with, like in the old days, we did a 5 or a flat fender, no automatic transmissions. Everything was manual, and you didn't have lockers. If you had
Right.
lockers, it was like insane. And then you really had to pick your line. And nowadays, everybody drives up and all of a sudden just, they go off as soon as they hit the dirt. It's four-wheel drive, it's lockers on, and You see these guys bashing and because they still can't pick a line.
Exactly. We were able to gain the experience of running, a wheel and a rig that really wasn't very capable. A sprung over, prime example, a sprung over or sprung under FJ40 with 31s or 33s on it. Yeah, it'll do okay, but you're hitting everything, and you got to learn where you really, really got to learn your line and where to place your tires. And when you graduate up to a rock buggy or a TJ or one of the new JKs or JLs that are already running 44, 38, 40-inch tires on them with air lockers, they're a point and go machine as long as the person behind the wheel has at least half a clue. But a lot of them don't, like you said. They can have the most capable rig on the face of the planet, but if you don't have the talent, you don't have the talent, and it ends up showing really quick.
Yeah, there's that Easter Jeep is coming up here in a couple of weeks, and I'll be heading out to Moab next week. But by the time people hear this, it'll be like the week after. I've already left by the time they hear this. But anyway, one of the things I like doing when I'm out at Easter Jeep is finding an obstacle, whether it's the Z turn or the Golden Crack or someplace like that, and watching the guys that have the $125,000 JKs or JLs try to drive them.
Oh yeah.
And it's nothing against those enthusiasts. I love that they're out there. They help the shop stay alive, with repair work and stuff. But their Jeeps are taking, or their rigs, it doesn't matter what they're driving, take abuse that doesn't necessarily have to happen if they could just read the terrain properly and know where to put a tire.
Yeah, it's well, that and the fact that it's great entertainment for us that have been around for 40 years in this industry and have the experience. So I'll take people like that, and I will absolutely help them because I don't want to see them get hurt or destroy their vehicle or anything like that. But I'm not gonna lie, I secretly behind the scenes I'm kind of laughing a lot.
Oh yeah, that's one of the things
I'll be
I
the first one to be there to help them too. I don't want to say that I'm an ass or anything like that, but it's all of us, I think, that have that background experience that have been around have to look at that stuff and go, oh, this is going to be a show. We'll let them go for a little bit, but once we see things are going to get really bad, then we'll jump in and help them.
Right,
but they're not going to otherwise either.
I don't spot people unless they are frantically asking for it, or if I've been asked to, like on a trail ride, like when we're in Moab, I'll jump in with some friends and they'll have some new people, or it'll be a business owner that's taken their people out, and they'll say, hey, would you help spot the group right behind you? And it's like,
sure,
all right, okay, but I think I'm a better spotter than I'm a driver myself, but that's because I see so much of it happening with the competitions. Right. But it's more fun to watch and heckle.
It is. Yeah. It's like you get that mentality of when we were sitting at Spider Lake on Heckler's Rock watching people go through little sloughs.
Yeah, and the greatest heckler of all time had to be Bob Roggy.
Oh my Lord, that guy, for someone who most of the time was so quiet and you'd hardly get a word out of him, you get a couple of beers in that guy and you get him on Heckler's Rock, oh, it's game on.
He was brutal too, and people would look at him like, first they want to, they hear the voice, they'd hear the comment, and so somebody would want to go like, oh, that guy needs his ass kicked, and they'd look around and see that it was the bear, and they're just like, we'll just keep going if we can.
Yeah, we're just gonna pass on that. Oh, I was the target of his heckling just as much as anybody else was, so I'm very familiar with it. Luckily, I got a pretty thick skin, so
yeah.
But you mentioned actually Easter Jeep Safari coming up. It's the last time I was in Moab was '99.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was, even though I'm living here now, I'm not living that far away from it. I just haven't had the chance to get up there. But the last time I was in Moab was '99. It was for EJS back then. And this was back when Lions Back and Dump Bump were still open.
Right.
You could still
love Dump Bump.
Oh, I watched a guy. This was like we were first starting to get in it. There was this college group. I don't know if they were electrical engineers. They had a old Range Rover out there. I mean, we're talking the real old ones where the spare tire sat in the middle of the hood type thing.
Right.
Uh, and they converted it to electric. They pulled the motor out, kept the basically mated the motor directly to the transfer case with a little bit of a torque converter in there, and we're running that thing around there as a test. And they took that thing and decided they wanted to do dump bump in that thing. And this thing bone stock as far as suspension wise, all bone stock, little 30-inch, 31-inch tires, whatever. They beat the living hell out of that thing on dump bump before they finally got that thing up. 15, 20 tries, hammering the throttle. I don't know how they didn't bust axles, transfer cases, because as you know, with an electric motor, you got 100% of your torque right off the bat. So
Right.
we sat there and watched them for like 45 minutes, just beat that thing, hammering the throttle. I don't know what that thing had for, if it had some sort of factory pauses or whatever, but it had all four tires just smoking on that hill multiple times.
One of the great stories I have is me and a guy from Cedar City. It was a really good friend of mine, Dave Burling. He owned the Auto Trim Design at the time in Cedar City. Mm-hmm. We were part of the Color Country 4-Wheel Drive Club, and we were out there at Dump Bump, and it was in the evening, and it was starting to get dark, and my son was with us, and he started digging holes in the ground. Now, he's eighth grade,
sure.
Something like that. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
he's digging holes in the ground, but he's digging them like 2 feet apart and pockmarks all over the ground. And we never had so much fun watching people, everybody's got beers in their hand. It's dark. Nobody's got a flashlight or anything. It's just whatever car lights, happen to be on or around. And watching people step into them frickin' holes and just disappear from vision, and you'd hear, God damn, they'd be swearing and stuff and getting up, and there'd be, somebody had stepped into one of those pock marks.
Oh, yeah, that's ankle breakers big time back then.
It was pretty hilarious. You'll have to bring that up to him next time you see Little.
Yeah, I will. I think I'm supposed to be going over there next week or week after or something like that. He had invited me over for something. I can't remember. I got to go back and look at my calendar.
Awesome.
But Easter Jeep Safari was a blast. That was that was actually when I had my YJ. So when I was with 4-Wheel Parts, I had a 93 YJ. Originally it was sprung over 35s. I bought it stock, but I sprung it over 35s. Air lockers front and rear. We'd swapped out when I did the spring over, we'd also swapped out the rear end for a Scout 44 in the back, kept the original 30 up front. Well, luckily for me at the time when I was with 4-Wheel Parts, obviously some perks come with that kind of job. So you probably remember Scott Porter with Warren.
Absolutely.
I got to be really good friends with Scott Porter. Hell of a guy. I mean, that's one of those guys that give you the shirt off his back if you needed it, just a super, super nice guy. He stopped into the shop quite a bit. And this was when Warren was really starting to really push a lot of their product and actually coming out with a lot of new stuff. And this is when they first came out with all their drivetrain product. So they came out with their axles, the new axle shafts, the 4130 axles, the Black Diamond coilover kit was still kind of in semi-prototype at the time. So Scott decided, because my red, white, and black Jeep, which is Warren's colors, was parked in front of 4-Wheel Parts all the time, he decided that, well, guess what? We're going to make that our rolling display. And he probably threw $50,000 worth of product at that thing in promo stuff. And the biggest thing was the Black Diamond coilover kit. So I had the second technically production Black Diamond coilover kit off their production line, went on my Jeep. It was before they were even really selling them to the public yet. So I had the second one on there. We did one of the very first installs other than prototype. We did one of the very first installs there at the shop. So that spent a lot of time out there. But that was the great thing about that was the fact that that thing just did so incredibly well with that kit. And I think that's where a lot of the first ability to buy an off-the-shelf link rod coilover type system, I think was probably the very first one out there.
I think wasn't it Kurt Hildebrand that originally designed that, and then I think Warren purchased it from him?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before he ever put it into production, he had the design and had like a couple of prototypes, and then Warren saw the advantage of it, and then partnered with Fox to build the shocks for it. But yeah, Warren put it into production, developed all the dies, everything, and put it into production. And they had a few little quirks here and there, like they had to build a custom rear section for mine because mine had a 44, not the factory Dana 35 in the back. So they had to build a custom rear tower because it was triangulated in the back. But they did all that, and it was, this is kind of going back to the Moab thing. That's where that Jeep, and probably got my first magazine experience, was with, Peterson's Four Wheel and Off Road.
Okay.
So I ended up getting a couple of I got a cover with them and a centerfold during Easter Jeep Safari. I actually got a centerfold shot with them. I was out there with, I think it was it Rustin or Ryan from Rubicon Express at the time. So we get into the section, I think if you remember out there, it's called Tip Over Challenge.
Yep.
So we're going up it, and I kind of got caught behind a little way. So they're up there, and because there was a bunch of other vehicles slowing down. So they're going around, and everybody's like, go to the right, go to the right. So there's that bush and that tree right there at Tip Over Challenge. Like, go that way. So I have a centerfold shot coming up that, and I got to the point where literally the Jeep was about to go over. My left front tire was a good 4.5, 5 feet in the air. And it was just about to tip. They stopped me right there, and all went, nobody went that way. They're laughing their ass off. I'm like, I'm going to get you guys. Don't worry. It's like, nobody's made it up that without rolling over. Oh, thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
Awesome. And that's the Jeep that you competed at Top Truck, isn't it?
Yeah, I competed at your event, and I competed at down at the Hammers in '99.
Didn't you do a Top Truck challenge as well?
No,
you didn't. Okay.
No, wanted to. The only person I know that I was actually ever knew really well that did that was, if you remember Grady McLeod.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, that rig that he built. Yeah, that was he ran Top Truck, I think 2 or 3 times.
Okay. Yeah,
but
that was
I never got
the black buggy. The black buggy that he ran in that, because he was at that first Cal Rocks put up or shut up as well.
Yes, he was.
He was the only one. He's the only vehicle I've ever seen to roll uphill.
I know.
He wedged that vehicle, the front tire, into that crazy stuff that was down there at I think it was at Put Up or Shut Up. Maybe it was one of the first Cal Rock events. Anyway, he wedged the tire in there, and then tried to accelerate, and there was enough torque where it rotated the car on that wheel, that axle, and just flipped him over. And I was like, what? How did that happen? Didn't break anything, just flipped it over because the tire was wedged. And I'm like, at what point do you just let go of the throttle?
Okay, we know Grady. Grady
Yes.
never let go of the throttle, ever.
True.
His foot had 2 positions, off the throttle and in the floor.
Yes. At what point did you first go on the Rubicon?
Actually, it was before I ever even had my driver's license. After I got my FJ40, so I was 14 and a half, 15 at the time. I don't even think I had my learner's permit yet. We went on a Toys on the Rocks run for one of their little Toyota Jamboree trips, and my mom drove my Land Cruiser up because I couldn't legally drive on the street, so she drove it up to Trailhead. My dad drove theirs, and then once we got to Trailhead, she hopped in with them, and I drove. That was my first time. I wasn't even 15 yet, and drove it all the way through into the Springs. I think we went into the Springs and then came back out the same way. We didn't go up to Tahoe, but yeah, we went all the way into the Springs and camped out. So that was probably my first 4-wheel drive trip, myself driving. So it would have been 85, I guess it was, because I would have graduated. So it would have been 84, 85.
Okay.
Was my first driving trip. I'd been up there obviously a few times before riding with my parents, but that was my first driving trip.
Okay. My first trip on the Rubicon was in 80. I want to say it was the end of 81, beginning of 82. It had to be probably 82. When did you meet the guys from Pirate?
Most of them I met just different trips on the trail. I would spend when I was between 16 and 17 and a half while my Land Cruiser was, when it wasn't broke down. Pretty much we spent every weekend on that trail. We'd get a few of us together, and it was funny because we'd be cruising town 10, 11 o'clock at night on a Friday night and went, yeah, this is boring. We'd find somebody of age to go buy us a bunch of beer. We'd load up, throw our gear in, and we'd leave Placerville at 11 o'clock at night and head up the trail. And most of the time we would usually just get into backside Loon, maybe Spider, that first night, and then just camp and party that night. So I think most of them I would met mostly at Spider. Between Lance, Roggy, I don't think I had met Roggy yet, but I had met Roggy during that time. Lance Clifford, obviously Dave Hollywood. So met most of those guys, I would say, during that time period between when I was probably between 17 and 18 years old, wheeling the trail up there.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you were one of the group that had, when you said it was Placerville and you went to El Dorado, I knew it wasn't, but I thought maybe you had gone to Ponderosa, because I know a lot of those guys all started off at, Ponderosa, or that's how they met.
Yeah, I think most of the Pirate guys, most of those guys, at least the original core group, were all Pondo guys.
Right. So the last job you had down there in off-road, was that Four Wheel Parts?
No, actually, I was recruited when I was at Four Wheel Parts. I'd been there for 2.5 years, and I'd kind of gotten tired of obviously the corporate BS with Four Wheel Parts. It just got to be a real nightmare down there, between different little games they would pull, with commissions, bonuses, things like that. It's just like, this is just getting old. And I was, during that time, I was approached by Rustin, with Rubicon Express, Rustin Smith.
Okay.
And they saw that I was, running that store very, very well, and they were in search of a general manager. So they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I moved over to Rubicon Express and became the general manager there it was a short term, honestly. It was about 6-8 months that I was with Rubicon Express. And unfortunately, there was a person, and Rustin and Ryan, nice guys, but there was a bit of a personality conflict in the way I like to do things and the way they wanted to do things. And unfortunately, I'm a bit thick-headed. So I tried to run things the way I knew worked really well at Four Wheel Parts. Well, I didn't get it into my head that, hey, this is a manufacturing company. They're an actual suspension company, not a sales company. So I had to get into a different mindset, and it never clicked. It never clicked.
Right.
So unfortunately, that only lasted about 6-8 months. It was a great experience, and and I appreciate Rustin and Ryan absolutely for giving me the opportunity. As a matter of fact, I don't know 100% how it worked out, but that's when Rubicon Express was developing their long arm TJ kit. So I do know, and I know that Marty, their chief engineer. So this was I obviously had the Black Diamond coilover kit on my YJ. He spent a lot of time out measuring my Jeep. So I have a feeling that my Jeep may have been the catalyst for their TJ long arm kit.
There you go.
I'm not saying that for sure, but I'm thinking it may have had something to do with it.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's not a direct, absolute copy,
Right.
and everybody throws their own twist into things. It's one of the things that, somebody that owns a shop back then, especially, they would teach guys, the people would come in that wanted to work. They'd teach them, how to weld, how to do things, make a cage or whatever. And then the guy would leave and start his own company and undercut
Right.
the prices. And, that happened a lot. And some of those guys are still in business and, have done really well. So,
Right.
it's, everybody needs that that catalyst for change, you might say, so or at least the place to learn. So yeah.
Yeah.
So then after Rubicon
Yep.
Express, what happened?
Well, at that point, after I'd left, we kind of parted our ways there. I decided to make a drastic and huge career change and actually got out of the four-wheel drive market completely, not only in working in it, but also just in playing in it too. I had a few things happen where we were, even when I was at Four Wheel Parts, we were down at I think it was actually down when I was down there for the rock crawling championship in '99 for the Warren one. You couldn't get away from the customers. I was down there not on a professional standpoint as far as the company was concerned. I was down there personally to have a good time, do some competition. And this is actually a funny story with Roggy. One of our customers at the time had a Suburban, had bought one of the Superlift 8-inch leaf spring Suburban kits. We had a rear leaf spring that was sacking out on him. And he only had it about 4 months. And him and I had gone back and forth a couple times on the phone. Well, I told him, I've got one in stock. I brought one in specifically for him. Pull your spring off, bring it in, exchange it. We'll give you the new one. Well, he kept not doing it, procrastinating. Well, I just kept it set aside for him. While I get down there to the Hammers, he's like, second day I'm there, he shows up in one evening, we're all drinking, 3 sheets to the wind, and decided to start picking a fight with me because I hadn't given him his spring yet. Okay? I'm not on the clock. I'm trying to enjoy myself. Roggy's there, a few other pirate guys were there, and he starts coming up, and I'm a decent sized guy, I'd like to think, and this guy was probably maybe 5'10", 5'11", like $160, scrawny little guy, and he starts picking a fight with me, pushing me in the chest, pushing me, and I'm like, dude, you don't want to go there. And I'm trying to keep professional because I'm like, this, even though I'm there on a personal level, if something happens and I swing on this guy, it's going to reflect on me professionally. Right. It's going to come back to my boss at some point, So I'm trying to play it cool. I'm like, dude, you need to stop. You need to back off. I'm not going to back off. I mean, obviously, a lot of alcohol's talking on his side. Finally, he starts to come in, and I'm thinking he's getting ready to swing. And the details are a little fuzzy exactly because it's quite a while ago. But right about that point is when Roggy stepped in. He stepped in, grabbed the guy, drug him off. He drug him off like 100 yards. He may have pummeled him. I don't know. But he drug the guy off quite a ways away from me and never saw the guy again the rest of that week.
I doubt if Roggy pummeled him. He probably just drug him away like grizzly bears do for later.
Exactly. Just stow him away for food for later. Exactly. But yes, that was Roggy came to my defense. It was great.
Yeah, because that event down there had, oh my God, the named vehicles. You had Hollywood with his big white Goliath, and then you had Brutus with Scott. Was it Scott Lentz?
Yeah, I think it was Scott Lentz. That was was it the orange CJ5?
Yeah, like a burnt orange, brownish.
Right, that was the one up at Donner, the same one up at Donner who he had the dually 381100 boggers on it, right?
Yes.
Front and rear.
Oh yes. No, the one that had dualies front and rear, that was actually that was a Samurai. Scott may have done something like that with Brutus, but I remember those guys used to run all like the 44 swampers and boggers and stuff like that. And then there was another guy, I can't even remember his name, but there was the three. It was Goliath, Brutus, and oh darn, my memory's bad. Anyway,
I know.
But another guy from that Auburn area.
Yep. Oh, yeah, I can't remember the name of the rig. Glasses. It was kind of a semi-tube chassis rig.
Right. Yep.
That was real long. Yeah,
yes.
It was like it was excruciatingly long for what he built it for.
True.
Yeah. So no, I remember that there was 58 rigs down there, if I remember right, and I ended up taking 10th place out of those 58 rigs. in the competition and made it to what they called the Dirty Dozen. I still have the sandstone plaques they gave to everybody. I
Nice.
still have 2 of those plaques, mine and my spotter, Jim Miller, had got a plaque. Well, I ended up with his plaque. So I've got both of them still from that event. That was a great event. I was actually pretty surprised. I ended up placing, like I said, 10th place, 1 place behind Curry. Between I'm brain farting the dad's name. This is before Casey even existed.
Ray.
Ray, yeah. Ray Curry was driver. I ended up placing one position behind him, and the only reason that is on one hill climb, my ass end slid over and I tagged a cone. Otherwise, I would have been in 9th place and they would have been in 10th.
Nice.
Yeah, and that was with the daily driver. That was basically I pulled the windshield, the doors off, pulled a bunch of stuff off to lighten it up, and threw some 36-inch Swamper SXs on it, and we hauled it down there. So it literally was my daily driver that drove back and forth from Placerville to 4 Wheel Parts.
That was the first competition that I had seen. I was the club president at the time in Cedar City, and I knew that the guy Dave Burling and I went to go watch the event because we knew there was a rock crawling competition coming in. It was ARCA was coming into Cedar City. We didn't realize that event was somebody else was running it. When we left like Friday evening, we got lost getting to Johnson Valley. We ended up in Big Bear, then turned around and came back because there really wasn't any internet or anything like that. We're just shooting from the hip. Oh, Johnson Valley OHV area, and we ended up in off Bessemer Mine Road in the rock piles or whatever they call it out there. And we camped that night, finally got up and realized we are not in the right area. We found the lake bed where everybody was camped out. And then the most horrific windstorm, like Johnson Valley is known for, happened that Saturday night. Because I can remember being in a tent with my son, and we had to put the ice chest in the tent to keep the tent from smacking our faces as the wind would blow. So we slept.
Yeah, that sounds about right, Johnson Valley.
Yeah. I thought for sure when I opened up the tent that morning, Sunday morning, that we would be like across the lake bed.
It was just going to drag the whole tent with you in it all the way across.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, no, the wind down there can get pretty horrendous. Luckily, I think in '99 when I was down there, it only hit one night. It was pretty bad, but other than that, because we were same thing, we were tent camping, and luckily there was only one night it was pretty bad. Other than that, we got lucky.
Yeah,
thank God.
Yeah, that was that event. Because that's when I saw those big rigs, and I was like, man, who are these guys that are building this shit like that? It was just crazy.
Right.
And then then we found out it wasn't the same event or the organizer. We go, wow, there's more of these things going on than we thought. And then after we helped ARCA get started there in Cedar City. Well, before that one, we went to the Arizona event that was that Ranch was doing, ARCA, and it was on Lower Woodpecker. Yeah, Lower Woodpecker, they used lower and upper, and then that's when I met Lance and Howdy Shell and Roggy.
Yeah. Oh, there's a name I haven't heard in a while. Vince Howdy Shell.
Oh yeah. So we had met there. As my wife was out of Placerville, and so she knew those guys, and then we got to know them, and the next thing I know, they're all staying at my house there in Cedar City when the Cedar City event came on. So, yeah, that's how I got to know all those guys. And then after that, I moved to California and started CalRocks, and Roggy helped with that, getting it started and getting that first event off the ground.
He did a lot of your course design, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yep, he did for the first 2 or 3 years. Him and Adam.
Oh yeah, Adam Dodds. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Roggy's got an eye for that course design. That's for sure.
Yeah, he does. He sure does.
Yeah, some of the stuff we ran that he designed, I looked at and went, dude, you got to be nuts. Are you doing this on purpose just to see how many rollovers we can get or what?
You know what though? Guys would get in there, break their stuff, and then they'd complain about the courses. And Bob would, a typical Bobism would go, well, if you didn't drive such shit, it wouldn't break, things like that, I mean, just, and,
That's Bob.
and people
No
would get
filter.
so mad, they'd come over and talk to me going, he just called my stuff junk or a pile of shit. And I'm like, well, where is it? It's broken over there. Well, maybe so. I mean,
Yeah. Apparently he didn't lie.
yeah, I wasn't going to argue with him.
No, not at all.
All right, I got to get him on. He is not refused to do it, but he wants to do it like more in person, and we've got to have a beer or two before we get started, because that's the only way I'll get any words out of him.
Oh yeah, you get a 6-pack in him, then he'll be ready to talk.
Oh, the stories that could be told. Anyway.
Oh, that guy, you better plan on sitting down all day.
So then you do the Warren. You came out and you competed as well at Put Up or Shut Up. You were one of the first 42.
Right.
What was that like for you? I mean, I know what it was like for me. It was chaotic nightmare that I absolutely fully enjoyed.
Right. It was a for lack of a better phrase, it was a shit show, because trying to get my rig together, because at that time my rig was pretty, had been beat up on the trails quite a bit, and it needed some stuff. So I'm scrambling for the couple of weeks before that, just trying to get it to a position where I thought it would actually hold up, because at that point I literally had started kind of changing my direction, and actually I was getting ready to probably sell it not too much longer after that. So someone had came to me and wanted the axles and the Warren hub kit and the axles out of the front of the thing. So I don't know why, but I pulled the air locker and the axles out of the front end and sold it, put it back to stock, and did a couple other little things here and there. Still had the 44 in the air locker in the back, but the front end was back to bone stock axles. And then it was shortly after that you had approached me where we'd found out about the comp. I'm like, well, what the hell? This will be one last great hurrah for this thing, and let's see if I can make it out in, hopefully less than 15 pieces. So we scrambled, got the thing together, brought it out there, and my God, that was a hairy course. There was a couple of really good ones, and actually, surprisingly enough, I think I was in the top 5 for quite a while till I ended up blowing a front axle. I remember coming across, there was a valley section where you had to go side hill across and then turn and drop down into the ravine. And again, Jim Miller was my buddy Jim was spotting for me. We got to a point where he actually had to grab the rope on the high side, go around a tree above me, and then come back down and hold the thing, because we were on such a side hill that most of the time as I'm trying to make that turn, I'm just on the downhill 2 wheels. My driver's side tires are both in the air, and it's just ready. I mean, he's digging his feet in, shoulder up against the tree, doing everything he can just to keep the thing from going over until I finally got it straightened, got it pointed downhill. That was a hairy one. I remember that specifically. And then the spot where you came in, and it was literally about a 4.5, 5 foot, almost straight drop off into a cutout washout. And as you dropped off, especially the short wheelbase rigs like mine, I dropped off, front bumper hit the ground. It stood up, pivoted on the front bumper, and laid against the wall. So only tire touching anything was the sidewall of the right rear tire. And it was, the bottom of that tire wasn't even near the bank anymore. It was about a foot off the bank the hill that I just dropped off of. And it's just pivoting on the front bumper, sitting there going, well, let's see now what I do. I can't winch out because my winch is buried in the ground at this point. I'm like, well, all I can do is get on the gas. And I think I put it in reverse, gave it a quick bump to the throttle, which spun the tire reverse spun it, bounced it back against the wall, and then I threw it in drive and dropped out of it. So that was a bit of a hairy spot there. And then from there, if you remember, you made an immediate left in that canyon, and you had to climb out almost the same amount of vertical.
Yep.
I'd seen a couple people go through it, and I'm like, well, the only way you're getting out of this is gas, So I made sure the air locker was locked in the back, look back. I was about 3 or 4 feet from it. I'm like, here it goes. Hammered the throttle, came up and out of the thing, and literally wheelied out. I don't know if you saw it or if you're watching somebody else, but I wheelied out of the thing. Front tires good, probably 4 or 5 feet in the air. And when they dropped, I had so much adrenaline going that I still had my foot on the gas. When it hit, second it hit, blew both ball joints and snapped the axle on the driver's side. So here's where Roggy comes back in to rescue again. You had him out there, and he was one of the tow rigs for getting, dragging people out.
Right.
He noses up to me. He runs his winch cable underneath the front axle, back up to my front bumper, sucks that winch up, and basically drags my Jeep up on top of his front bumper to where the front end was mostly off the ground, and backs up and basically, as like a tow truck but in reverse, dragging my Jeep back to camp in reverse.
That's awesome.
The left front wheel is just off. It's hanging there flat. So that was the end of that competition for me, unfortunately. But at that point, I was actually, I think Jeremy Faber was running that tube chassis FJ40 that he has. I think he still has it. I was actually ahead of him at that point in the standings, and it was pissing him off that my daily driver was beating his tube chassis rig.
Oh man, that was quite the event. It really was. There was so much going on everywhere that it was absolutely nuts. Oh yeah,
literally. I mean, I think it was a matter of you probably didn't have enough volunteers or whatever, because it was crazy. It's like half the time I'm going, where do I go now? What course do I go to now? But again, like I said, that was 20 years ago, and we've all learned a lot since then.
The disorganization. Absolutely. I thought we were pretty well organized, because that's why I got into doing the rock crawls, was that, having been around the others, I thought, man, I can organize this better. But that wasn't necessarily the case with the first one.
Right.
And you think back on it, I mean, hell, I even ended up in court on Friday night to make that event happen.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because you were having troubles with the permits or something like that?
Yeah, in fact, because we didn't have any permits, we were using, the place as a zoned recreational area. And the sheriffs actually came in and said, oh, no, you need to have a permit, county permit. And they gave me a ticket at 10:30 in the morning. By 1 o'clock, we had a lawyer and a civil engineer on site. And we went to court at 5, beat their cease and desist order, the county of Amador, and was able to put the event on. We had to cap it at 1,000 people, so we really pissed a lot of people off, because I'll bet if we would have allowed everybody to come on the property that wanted to, we'd have had probably 4,000 or 5,000 people out there.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it at all.
And that's why I looked at it and said, okay, I'm going to continue doing this because people want this.
Oh, yeah.
And then that first year was pretty crazy, because the next event site we were supposed to use was Dead Man's Point down in the Apple Valley area. And it's a big rock area, and it's owned by this guy that's a real estate agent. So we made a deal with him to be able to use that, and then he wanted to know, he goes, okay, I'm going to need all of your driver contact information, all your marketing partners or sponsors contact information. And I'm like, no, you're just the property owner. I'm not giving you that information. And he goes, he wanted to, if this was successful, he wanted to put his own events on. So he wasn't a rock crawler, so he didn't have access to everybody. So he wanted me to provide him with all that information. I told him to take a, flying leap, and we canceled that. We didn't cancel that event. We just canceled going to that event. And so then I drove out it was over New Year's. It was just before then is when we had the meeting. Went out New Year's to Johnson Valley and met John James, Desert Toy, from the Tin Benders, and we ended up, he goes, well, we should use Lions Pride Park there, the gun range in Lucerne Valley. So
Mhm.
in a short period of time, very short period of time, we got the permits for that going through San Bernardino County, and we put that event on there. And that was our first series event, and that was 2002. And I think it was even like March that we did that event, and it was widely successful, with not only the drivers that showed up, but with the spectators as well. And
Absolutely.
so,
Like a huge area for a spectator. I mean, look at KOH now. I just went this last one, and they estimated somewhere between 70 and 90,000 people there.
right,
Uh, and
that's
now,
insane.
and maybe you've heard more because you're in that end of it a little more. Suppose there was rumors floating around that they're talking about moving KOH to the Sand Hollow area. And I've heard a couple of rumors about it, and I'm going, where in the hell here would you put that? Sand Hollow HV Park ain't anywhere near big enough for that kind of venue or that kind of volume. So I'm trying to figure out where they would even put it out here.
I I would imagine, because of the personalities involved with Sand Hollow, meaning my son,
Yeah,
and the personality involved with KOH, meaning DC, Dave Cole,
yeah, yes.
that I don't think that would ever happen. I just don't, because I know Rich has a lot of power out there because of Trail Hero and what he's done out there and how
Right.
successful that's been, and that most of the events out there, if they're 4-wheel drive related, he's got like the permit. I mean, they only allow so many permitted events out there, and he owns a bunch of those dates. I don't know how
Right.
that would work out, but
Yeah.
you never know. Money can make things happen. So who knows?
Well, we know how well him and Cole get along. So
Yeah, famously.
yeah, there's no love lost there.
Yeah, none whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, I'd say probably the only big event that happens out here that isn't under his purview would be probably the UTV takeover.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Other than that, he has a hand in just about everything else that happens in that area.
True. And that's because the park and BLM and the state park all trust what he's done in the past and gave him that opportunity, to be like the person that they trust to go between.
Right. No, he does an excellent job. And I mean, it was, like I said, I'd never met him before moving here. Obviously, you and I knew each other for a long time, but I'd never met your son until I moved here. And a hell of a guy. I mean, he does just an amazing job with Trail Hero. And I'm very, very impressed with the organization and how well he has it working and flowing. It's pretty damn smooth. For the size of event in such a short period of time, he definitely, and all the other stuff he has going on, it's definitely very, very smooth.
Well, acorns don't fall far from the tree.
Don't hurt yourself. Pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, I just dislocated my elbow. Anyway, so then let's go ahead and jump into. I know that you said you got away from the off-road industry.
Right.
Touch on that real quick, and then we'll jump into what's happening now.
Great. Well, this was when when I was at Four Wheel Parts. One of the customers that I'd met had a black YJ, pretty well built, and had done a 302 conversion, injected 302 conversion, all this stuff into it. And he worked in the low voltage electronics industry, so voice, data, CCTV, that kind of thing, fire alarm, security. And he worked for a company out of Sacramento called Nutter Electric. Well, he had talked to me a couple of times, and I kind of got to understand what the business was. Well, after I left Four Wheel Parts, went to Rubicon Express, and then that didn't work out all that well. I was still in contact with him, still, did a little business with him because he'd bought some Rubicon Express parts. Well, I contact him and say, you know what? I'm ready for a change. I'm just ready for a complete career change. I've done this off-road thing for several years now. I need something different, So I contacted him, and I took a huge pay cut, unfortunately. But hey, it is what it is. You got to do that when you change careers. He brought me in as an apprentice, doing low voltage electronics, doing building out data rooms and doing basically computer infrastructure, that kind of thing. And brought me in, and again, as I usually do, I don't know how it actually works out, but maybe it's my alpha personality or whatever, but it usually works out. Within about 6 months, I was running crews for him. So we had a great company going with Nutter, where that division, the low voltage division, we did a lot of huge jobs. You're trying to think what was probably one of the biggest ones we did was E-Trade. When E-Trade had that building in Rancho Cordova right there on Data Drive, when they built that building, we did that whole job. And that was just in the voice and data part of it was a good year and a half long job, just pulling and terminating cables, building out the data rooms, things like that. So he introduced me to that, really got me good and trained in a lot of those aspects. I worked for Nutter for probably about 2 years, I guess it was, 2.5 years. Left there, and I want to think from there, I went to a place called Tri-Signal Integration, right out of El Dorado Hills. They did the voice data stuff, but also that's where I learned fire alarm, security, CCTV, fiber optics, that kind of thing. So working for them, we did, again, ran crews for them, learned a lot about that industry. So I kind of kept growing in that industry and literally was out of the four-wheel drive stuff for, God, probably close to 10 years. I didn't get back in, honestly, heavily get back in until, was it 3 years ago when I bought my Can-Am, bought my side-by-side. It was just one of those things where, I just go out and play with people and have fun and stuff, but I didn't even own anything until I bought the side-by-side. So we were, that industry has done really well for me. I grew from basically being minimum wage base to where I am now, working for the company that I'm with now, which is Direct Digital Controls. It's HVAC control equipment. I do all the systems programming, engineering, electrical engineering. Used to do some install out in the field, but now working or living here in Utah, I do all my work remotely, which is great. But that's how that kind of graduated through that particular industry. And I've been now with Direct Digital for, God, 17 years going on.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. And is that kind of, is that how the business that you have now, besides working for them, your side gig, I guess you'd call it, you're doing the company Mega Whips.
Correct.
And you bought a UTV, you saw the need for a better quality product. Is that what it was that drove you to doing that?
That's exactly it. I saw the need right after I bought the car, looking at accessories, and this is probably how a lot of these UTV companies started. Realize the pricing's ridiculous, and you're paying for, honestly, when it comes to anything short of maybe suspension or drivetrain stuff, you're paying through the nose for, honestly, very subpar, sub quality parts. And I started realizing what was out there, and the thing I kind of gravitated towards was, what can I build fairly inexpensively, quickly, but still build a much better product than what's out there. And that's where we kind of got into the LED whips. It was a natural progression for me with my background in low voltage electronics. I'd already dabbled in some of it, building my own custom Christmas decorations for my house back in California before I'd ever bought the side by side. I built driveway hoops and little dancing hoops, those kind of things with LED strip and what they call an Arduino controller, which is you may be familiar with them. It's a custom program controller that you can write code for and then design all your own lighting patterns, things like that. Started getting into it, learning what all the little idiosyncrasies about LEDs, how they work, voltages, things like that, and went, well, hell, most of these guys are building LED whips. They're taking a CB antenna, wrapping a fiberglass pole, wrapping some strip around it, shrink tubing it, and calling it, hey, now I can sell this thing now I can sell this thing that I only have $30 into for $200 or $300. Like, well, I can build something a lot better that doesn't break every other time you take the thing out. So I started diving into it, pulling in some product, doing some prototype, end up designing a completely different product than what the industry was used to, where we used a much heavier duty inner core. We originally started with a fiberglass core, then graduated out of that, realizing that fiberglass core just didn't work out really well. Went to a heavy wall polycarbonate tube inner core, all CNC machine, billet pieces. I probably have, in our first year of prototype components, I got a stack of broken and damaged whips. There's probably 50 to 100 of them. But again, that's a process you go through when you're trying to come up with the best product you can. Finally, we, after lots and lots of design changes, we came up with the design that we have now, and it's virtually indestructible, with a polycarbonate outer casing, polycarbonate inner core, which adds a lot more flex. We do a spring base on them, a completely redesigned disconnect system, retained cable system. The whole product, as you've seen as the ones you're running, is drastically different than virtually anybody else on the market. And well, it's paying off really well for us. In the last 2 weeks, we've picked up 5 new accounts just in the last 2 weeks, for the simple fact that they see ours and they compare. I'm not going to put any names out there, but they compare to what they're already carrying, which is a couple of major names, and we've taken accounts away from one particular company. I've taken probably 10 accounts away from them between California and southern Utah and Arizona.
Nice.
So there's something to be said when you've got a small little company, mom and pop company like mine can do that, and we stand behind our product, and we build something that is, I'm not going to say is indestructible, but I've got multiple customers that have barrel rolled their UTVs and didn't break our whips. I think I've only had one customer that even tacoed a whip in a barrel roll, and the whip still functioned. It was a 6-footer, rolled his Razor over in it was a Can-Am, rolled it over in a witch's eye at Glamis. He had 2 of our 6-footers on there. The inside one buckled in the middle. The outside one hit the sand and literally held the car up. It was sitting there supporting the car without buckling. The inner one still worked when he got it back onto its wheels. I mean, it made almost a 90-degree bend right in the middle. It still worked. It still lit up and did the full chasing colors right up to the bend point. And then after the bend point, it just lit up solid white. Cause that's, it's a flexible PCB. So it just did damage one of what they call the IC chips, which control the color changing inside those.
Right.
He straightened it back up, threw some duct tape around it, and ran it the rest of the weekend.
Nice.
Then came to me and said, hey, this happened, was totally awesome. I'm like, you know what? You send me the pictures of that, I'm more than happy to replace that for you. That's great for us. It's great advertising for us. So
sweet.
We developed a product I think is just incredibly much higher end and much stronger than basically anything else out there on the market.
Cool. And there's a lot more market to take as well.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, like I said, when we first started the company, we delved into a few other things. Like I built some radius rods, I built plates, did some suspension components, a few other little minor things here and there to help kind of sustain. Because I knew the mega whips, the whips portion of it was going to be where the company was going to go. But of course, just like anything else, you need something to help generate capital to build the company. And those all things helped. Well, kind of as the stories like how it progressed was the original company was not Mega Whips. The whip line was my Mega Whips line. That's what we named it. But the original company was Trail Tech Side by Side.
Okay.
So when we had that, I was a retail company. I sold online. I'd go out and pursue a little bit of wholesale, but mostly online and retail customers locally. We didn't have a shop, a storefront or anything like that. No brick and mortar. But that's where the company started, was Trail Tech Side by Side. Well, kind of a funny story. There's another company out there called Trail Tech. Okay. And my Trail Tech name came from way back when. We kind of glossed over, we didn't get to it, but way back when I was still had the Jeep and was building stuff for the Jeep, I had actually started a company back then called Trail Tech. And it was, we had a small little shop right in Placerville, where I would do installs and we'd sell accessories and a few other little minor builds and things like that. And I had that for about a year and a half. unfortunately, it was my first dive into business and really didn't know what I was doing. So it didn't, things didn't go well with that, but we all learned from our first businesses. But I took that name and I still had that name. And that's when I started started my side-by-side accessory company. So we just added SXS to the end of the name. Well, come to find out, and I knew this other company existed. They'd started after I originally had the name, but there's a company out there that builds more overlander stuff for the dirt bikes, for like your BMW motorsports, things like that. So steering stabilizers, a few little different things for these bikes. Well, they're called Trail Tech. Well, Polaris Industries had bought that company, and they had the company for a while. Well, apparently they were getting tons of phone calls about my Trail Tech, looking for components for us. But somehow, because of my website wasn't out there far enough, wasn't registered with enough search engines, they ended up with them instead of me. So they're fielding, from what they said, 20, 30 calls a day, looking for me. Well, I get a email from Polaris Industries about a year ago, I guess it was now, maybe a little longer. Not less than a year ago, because we haven't been here for a year. So about 9 months ago, I get a cease and desist letter from Polaris Industries. And I'm thinking, I've got this little tiny company. Why is Polaris Industries interested in me, and what could I be doing to affect them? I ended up calling their lawyer and spent probably about an hour and 45 minutes on the phone with their lawyer. And he basically explained to me, he's like, look, there's nothing you're selling that's in competition with us. The only problem we have is the name. We've got the name copyrighted. So I obviously, even though I had the name first, I could have gone through a lot of stuff to fight him. But honestly, the direction I was going with Mega Whips anyway, was a direction we were planning on going to begin with. All they did was expedite it for me. So I said, no problem. This is something we had in the plans to begin with. So shortly after that phone call, I started the LLC proceedings and ended up getting Mega Whips LLC completely set up, and then switched the company completely over to Mega Whips LLC. Dropped all my suspension, everything, so focused strictly on the whip product and rock lighting, that kind of thing, and also switched the direction of the company to strictly a wholesale company only, and stopped selling retail. So I wasn't going to be doing events or anything like that, strictly wholesale. My reasoning for that was I would be the only LED whip company on the planet that I'm aware of that does not sell retail. So that makes me the only company selling to dealerships and selling to my accounts that they never have to compete with.
And that's the way the four-wheel drive industry has gone, is just the opposite of that. Correct. Everybody that was a manufacturer or a wholesaler is now selling retail. And so if you've been using their products and you're installing and you have a brick and mortar store, all of a sudden, your customer can buy it at the same price that you can, and they've taken away that opportunity for the business owner.
Exactly, and it's in my opinion, it was a very bad decision by these big companies for the small builders, for their accounts that were the small builders and small shops. I experienced that competition firsthand when I was working for Four Wheel Parts. As a general
they were
manager
the originator of that.
Exactly. They had their mail order division, and then they had their retail stores. Granted, my retail store did good, but I had to compete with our own damn company. And that's what I had a big problem with. And I remember the nightmares of what it would do to our profit margins and our bottom line at that store, where I had to take in, if someone came in to buy a set of tires or a Rancho suspension lift kit or something like that, and I had to sell those things to them at 5-10% profit margin at the best. I mean, that didn't even cover my overhead,
because the customer could buy it, have it shipped to their house, load it in their Jeep, come to you, have you install it for less than what you would sell it to them over the counter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It just didn't make any sense.
No. And that's why I found it very strange. The only reason I can think of that, all the big companies have gone that route and started selling retail is because of the ease of internet and the e-commerce, how e-commerce is so hugely exploded in the last 10 years, they saw an opportunity to make higher profit margins, which is great. And I understand that that's capitalism. Let them have at it. I went the other direction because I looked at it and went, you know what? I want to support my dealers. I want to be the company that goes, hey, you guys got a problem? Call me. I will take care of it. Like warranty issues. I'm probably one of the only ones that tell my dealers, you know what the written warranty is. If somebody comes in with a problem and you feel it's a legit problem, don't send them to me. Take care of them. Give them a replacement. Call me after the fact. Make sure your customer's happy and out the door. Call me and let me know, and I will replace your product. I'm going to trust your judgment. I pick and choose my dealers, especially after talking to them, to know who I can feel good about that's going to go, yeah, I can judge this as a warranty or not a warranty pretty well. And I let them have carte blanche on it. Most of the other whip companies out there, they have to get referred directly to the company, regardless where they bought it from. They have to get referred directly to them, and then they go back and forth with them with emails, phone calls. I've heard horror stories of one in particular that just for a 1 4-foot whip took them 6 months to get it replaced, between finally getting it approved and then having to wait for the product.
Right.
I will not do that to my customers. I simply will not. I want to make sure that they can be out that very next weekend riding and doing what they want to do. Because these people drop $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 into these side-by-sides, and they don't do that to let them sit in the garage because they're waiting on a warranty part.
Right.
And they want to take that right.
And the thing is with the side-by-sides, people don't hang on to their individual side-by-side for very long. Most, right. they buy it. They're carrying, the bank is carrying the note on it, or Polaris or Can-Am with their in-house financing. They either sell that rig to somebody else and then get a new one and build another one, or it burns to the ground. Which is kind of a common theme, it seems. And then so you've got a steady stream of customers, even if it's an old customer, that had bought your product previously from one of your suppliers, is still going to go and buy it the next time when they're building their new one.
Right. So the repeat, you keep people happy. This is across all businesses. Repeat customers are your best friend. Absolutely. And if you can, develop a rapport where they know that you're a good company and you support people, they're going to keep coming back to you. Right. They're flat out going to keep coming back to you. And that's the rapport I build. And I try to double that with the fact that we build, in my opinion, the best product on the market by far. So you have a product that they literally can feel comfortable going out and beating, running their car at 80 mile an hour across the whoops and watching them whips bounce all over the place and not going to hurt them. That's what makes me feel comfortable and makes them feel comfortable, is I can go beat my car and not worry about it. I don't have to slow down and go, okay, that thing's moving around. I'm going to snap that. It's going to break off. Or I got to, when I go through the tunnel at Sand Hollow, I got to fold that thing down or I'm going to break the thing off. They don't have to worry about that. They literally don't have to worry about that. I never take mine down. I drag them through the tunnel. I've smacked mine on my garage door several times. Pulling it into the toy hauler. That's probably the biggest thing that snaps a lot of whips is people forget to take them off. They pull them in the toy hauler and they snap them off when they pull them into their toy hauler and forget. Like, oh great, well there went $300 or $400. Now I got to wait for a warranty.
Right. I don't run mine very often because I'm only in the dunes. We run the beaches down here, but they're not dunes, so you don't have to have a whip on the vehicle. When we go to Glamis once a year is when I run them. I've run them on some other trails. In fact, out there outside of Vegas, there's I can't even remember what the name the area is called, 4-wheel drive area, but it's
Red Rock.
Yeah, it might be the Red Rocks, and there's these sand trails through the riverbeds and stuff like that, and It's almost like a dune because you can't see the road or what's coming at you unless somebody's got a whip on. Right. And it's all real narrow, 2-track, but very narrow. And so I put them on then and ran them. just so that people could see me over the top of that. But they ride in the back of my truck along with everything else, and they're just the right length to fit in the back of that Raptor. But they take a beating back there because, well, toolboxes and everything else are flying around. Because unfortunately, I don't drive the Raptor very slow. I drive it more like a side by side.
You don't say.
Yeah, and they've never failed. I mean, they are sturdy, very very sturdy product.
Well, that's the thing. We built them to take abuse. We built them to, people think, well, I gotta take them off. Like up in the Northern California, people that run the woods a lot. Well, I gotta take them off to run through the woods because I don't want to break mine. Bounce them off trees. Have at it. I encourage people to go out and beat them. I want to see how much abuse people can put these things through, before they do fail. I haven't seen one yet. I've actually had one customer. And as you see, we've got the springs on the bottom. Well, there's a reason for those springs because it's not just a pole that's wrapped in shrink tube. This is an engineered whip. The whole thing works together. That's why we built the springs into them. The tube itself and the polycarbonate. The whip itself doesn't have a whole lot of flex because of that polycarbonate outer casing. So we transfer all that load and all that abuse down to the spring. So I've got one customer that decided, well, I don't want to run the springs because those springs will unthread. You can take them off and bolt the whip right directly to a mount. It's still a 1/2 inch stud, just like the bottom of the spring has. Well, he decided he didn't want to run the spring. Made it very clear to him that if you modify the whip in that way, it technically voids our warranty. Okay, but that being said, he managed to get a 1.5 years out of running a set of 6-footers without springs before one of them finally started to separate where the polycarbonate tube goes into the aluminum housing on the bottom. Never broke the whip, but it finally broke that epoxy loose from all the whipping and bouncing around without a spring. It finally started to break that loose. Honestly, I'm amazed it lasted a 1.5 years, especially with the 6-footer, because he was not running that spring. He bought it from our dealer, UTV Addiction in Reno. He bought it from them, took it back into him. Sent me a couple pictures, and I'm like, were you running these without the springs? And he was honest, said, yeah, I was running without the springs. All right. You've had it for a 1.5 years. Technically, you're past the warranty on breakage, but you know what? We're going to take care of you on one condition. Put the springs back on.
Right.
Put the springs back on, and you'll get 5 years out of these things.
Yeah, and then with the shrink wrap you put the shrink wrap over the spring, and the thing's not all over the place.
Exactly, and that's why I'll include that. Even with our little 2-footers, not even needed on a 2-footer because the things just don't move with that spring. But we include it with every one of them. But when you get into 4, 5, and 6-footers, yeah, you get a lot of movement, especially if you've got a 3x5 flag on the thing, which we encourage. Put the big flags on. We don't have any problem with that. But you get that big flag on there, and you're cruising at 60 mile an hour across the desert. Yeah, that thing's going to be moving around. There's a lot of load from that flag. Ain't going to hurt the whip. As long as you're putting that spring on there, it ain't going to hurt the whip. You throw that shrink tube on there that we include with the kit. And that shrink tube is mainly not for the high speed running, but it's for the whoops and the bouncing that keep those things from going all over the place. That's where the biggest complaint with a lot of people with springs on whips. Well, they bounce all over. Well, we've solved that problem. Not only do we use the barrel shaped spring, not a straight spring, we use that barrel shaped spring, which drastically reduces that. Then you shrink tube it, problem solved. You don't get that after bounce. Yeah, you're going to get a couple of bounces back and forth, but it's going to stop. And as you've seen with your 6-footers, you can bounce those things like crazy, and they're going to come back to a stop and not beat the heck out of your rig.
Exactly, because where I have mine mounted, I was worried that they were going to smack the cab. They don't. Not at all. And that's Glamis doing, 80 miles an hour across, through there. So.
Right.
And I do not suggest that anybody drive their vehicle at 80 miles an hour in Glamis. Okay.
Disclaimer.
Yeah, disclaimer. I didn't really do that. I was just using that for advertising purposes.
Yes, exactly.
Closed course professional.
Yes.
So what's next? You just going to concentrate on that one product, or do you got some other things in mind?
Well, we are working on more new products. So currently, like I said, we've got 2 foot through 6 foot whips. We've got our 8 pod rock light kit, which those two things obviously are our biggest product. We've come out with a couple of little small components. We still get, even though the whips will handle all, full-time riding, we still get people that want to run just their standard fiberglass poles. So we've come up with an adapter that drops right into our disconnect housing. You pop the whip out, new adapter drops in, and it's got a half-inch 20-pitch thread hole, which 90% of your fiberglass poles, that's what they have at the bottom of them. So we've got adapters for those now. We're also doing one in a 3/8 size too, for some of the smaller flag poles that people are liking to run. So I'm gonna have those here probably in about a month. That's the small little things we're doing. We have a RV pole that I'm just about complete on and ready to go into production with. 22-foot extendable pole with a 3-foot one of our 3-foot whips, fully controllable through RF control. Everything all embedded right inside the pole, so there's virtually no wiring that you see at all.
So you know where your campsite is at night?
Exactly. So, and that's our first, our what we call our Rev 1, our Rev 1 version of it. Our Rev 2 version is we're working, and this is going to be a little ways out, but we're getting the details worked out. But we're actually going to have a 4-footer that goes on there. That's going to be Bluetooth control. And what it is the first 3 foot will be controllable, and then the top 1 foot will be controllable separately from the first 3 foot. So you literally can take the top foot of it and change the color, change the pattern independently of the lower 3 feet. So you can literally make a very unique color combination, pattern combination. So when you're sitting at, say, you're parked at Halloween at Sand Mountain, and you're at the top of Comp Hill looking down, you can go, yeah, there's 4,000, camp poles out there, but that one's definitely mine.
Nice.
So we're working on that. That's coming out. I'm hoping in about 2 months, maybe less, we'll have the Can-Am and Razor signature lights that fully integrate with our controllers. So they'll do the full chasing colors, turn signals, as well as the standard driving light option, which I don't think anybody else right now offers, in the replacement lights on the front. So those are in final prototype stages, just getting a few little idiosyncrasies worked out on those. Our 2, 3, and 4-foot versions of our whips have updated. We now have increased the LED count by about 25% on those first 3 links. So you've got a good 25% brighter whip, which were already pretty bright to begin with. Now you've got about 25% more LEDs, which translates to about a 25% brighter whip than most other ones out on the market right now, including our old ones, previous ones. We didn't do it with the 5s and 6s just because, the whip is so long, it didn't really need it. Plus, you could end up with problems with voltage drop with that long of a whip and that many LEDs. Right. Most of your vehicles just don't produce the kind of amperage to push through there to actually keep those lit up well when you go that high of an LED count. So they're going to stay that way. Those I have available now. We just finished getting those and got our first production run of those in. We're always looking. One of my customers actually just came up with a idea that I'm going to start experimenting with an LED whip, and I think a couple other companies are doing something like this, but like a chase light essentially. We're looking at some design, a design coupler that kind of will make this thing look like the double-ended lightsaber. With a pair of 2-foot whips, one going out either way, individually controllable. With our Bluetooth controller, they would have turn signal option, everything like that. So essentially a double-ended whip with a center mount, and that still has full disconnect capability too.
Wow,
so,
that's kind of cool.
Yep. Yeah, I think that'll be something good, so that you can put it on the back of your car. You can put it up right at the cage and act like a chase light, because it'll have all the same chasing colors like you would with your whips or anything like that. So that's something we're working on right now. Trying to think what else we got going. My mind's always going, trying to come up with new product. I'm always listening to my customers, with them ask me, okay, do you do something like this, or is something like this possible? And I'll tell them, I'm like, if I think it's possible and I think there's a market for it, absolutely, I will definitely dive into it. So I'm never going to slow down as far as wanting to come up with new products. I'll keep improving our existing stuff, and I'm going to keep trying to come up with new stuff as long as it's feasible and I think there's a demand for it. I'll do it.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, Mike, I want to say thank you for coming on board and talking about your life and your past history and what you got going now with Mega Whips. I really like the idea of the chase lights. That's something we'll have to talk about later. And
Definitely.
yeah, I hope to see you again here real soon. I'll be in that area, Cedar City. We're going to be putting a rock crawl on here shortly. So
Right, like
yeah.
I'd love to be part of that.
Perfect. So yeah, let's figure you coming on up there and bringing a display. I know that you can push people to your distributors, but might be worthwhile putting up a display.
Yeah, I actually have a dealership in Cedar City now.
Oh, great.
Jorgensen,
Okay.
or not Jorgensen. In Cedar City, it's DNP.
Okay. Yep.
DNP Performance, and I've got Jorgensen's up in Richfield.
Excellent.
They're both taking their first deliveries of product next week, actually.
Yeah, DP. That's Dean Bullock. Yep.
Yeah. Dean, and I guess is Lacey his wife, or
No,
she's the one I
P
always
was
talk to.
Pauline. That was his wife. That's his wife, but that's I think the daughter.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Cool.
No, it's that I talk to all the time. So yeah, I'm delivering both of those locations their first order next week. So
Excellent. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming on board and spending this morning with us talking.
hey, I really appreciate it, Rich. It's been a great time, and been a great time catching up on some old stories.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to do it some more when we're in Cedar. Thank you.
Oh yeah. We'll talk some more over some beers.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye.
Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to Conversations with Big Rich. Please let your friends know about this podcast. Let us know what you think of Conversations with Big Rich. Please forward ideas to me, contacts of those that I should attempt to interview. Leave a rating on any of the services you found us on. We look forward to your comments and ideas. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and grab all the gusto you can.